The town where everyone honks. I used to travel a great deal. Part of that was due to the nature of my job, but the rest fell back to a lifelong interest in seeing quaint little country towns. Frankly, I loved touring the wide open road in my sporty convertible and discovering new haunts along the way. It made the soulless drudgery of life a bit more bearable for me. In all of my years traveling for work or pleasure, though, I never uncovered another place quite like the strange little town of Newton. It is unique. I stumbled across this virtual time capsule by pure coincidence. I'd meant to take the freeway to a much more familiar destination, but somehow missed the turn. From that point on, my plans went completely off the rails. All of a sudden, I found myself smack dab in the middle of a bizarro time warp. Honestly, I could scarcely even believe the place was real. The sleepy little community I discovered by pure happenstance is an amazing tribute to a bygone era. Every car which passed me by on the road was a vintage automobile. At first, I assumed I'd stumbled onto a classic car parade or a showcase rally for professional restorations, but there was no newer model cars anywhere to be seen. It was genuinely startling, and that wasn't the only odd thing either. Not by a long shot. Everywhere I looked, I saw long outdated technology and forgotten signs of the past. The gas pumps didn't even have a pay-at-the-pump feature, and regular fuel was still an option here. I was dumbstruck by the very notion that leaded gas was still available. I thought it had been outlawed for years. Another thing which struck me as rather strange was the unwavering commitment each motorist had to honk at each other as they passed by. It wasn't an angry, blaring blast of fury to release frustration either. They just tooted their horns lightly at each other and then waved as a polite greeting. Frankly, watching that social exchange was surreal. I never witnessed anyone honk their horn as a gesture of respect. In larger towns and metropolitan cities I frequented, a horn blast is primarily used as a sonic weapon. A few sharp honks are typically issued to chastise the poor driving skills of the other driver. There in Newton, however, I found it to be an exclusive courtesy response. Before I could expend any more effort analyzing this incredibly different behavior, I witnessed a number of other startling things. The town had an honest-to-goodness drive-in movie theater and a soda fountain counter downtown. It was a welcome slice of lovely Americana, which I assumed was long gone. An involuntary smile crept across my face as I drank it all in. Unsurprisingly, the prices for food, fuel, and other general commodities were in line with the same distant time period. I stopped in to look over the available wares of a Woolworth dime store. It was eye-opening. The atmosphere was that of the early 1970s hometown USA. Even the dress style of the employees and customers suggested a blast from the past. Large collars, sideburns, wingtip shoes, and horn-rimmed glasses dotted the idyllic landscape. Small kids were outside jumping rope and playing hopscotch on the sidewalk. In one well-manicured neighborhood, I witnessed a young man delivering newspapers door to door by his bicycle. The whole thing was incredible. At first, I was too stunned to do anything other than walk around and stare in bewilderment at the unexpected time capsule. That soon, however, gave way to opportunity. At the town dealership, almost new-looking classic cars were available for used clunker prices. I had to decide whether I wanted to buy a stunning 1969 Dodge Charger or a beautiful Corvette Stingray for the equivalent of a couch cushion change. In reality, I wanted to buy both of them and a dozen other underpriced treasures, but no business in town accepted credit cards. I only had enough cash in my wallet to buy one of those jaw-dropping beauties. If there had been an ATM, I would have loaded up a whole car carrier full of gas-guzzling American muscle cars of the past and miscellaneous antique finds. Unfortunately, that wasn't an option. Back driving on the main highway, the motorists honked at each other and waved dutifully. I was a bit amused to realize that I wasn't worthy of a honk for many of them. Obviously, they could tell I was an outsider. I found myself envying those tight-knit townsfolk who knew and respected each other. It never occurred to me that I wasn't honking at any of them first. Once I realized that in the sleepy bygone town, you probably had to give a toot to get one. I initiated the process and received my very first friendly honk. I was thrilled, and it made me grin again in fulfillment. It felt absolutely fantastic to finally be accepted in such a personal way. Right then and there, I decided I was so in love with the magical place that I wanted it to become my hometown too. I begrudgingly drove my new 1969 Charger Hemi RT back toward my current home address with a level of satisfaction I'd never experienced before. I had honest intentions of packing up all my possessions and permanently settling in Newton immediately. But I decided there was always time for that necessary responsibility later. But I decided there was always time for that necessary responsibility later on. I felt too good behind the wheel to spoil the moment. Instead, I gripped the stick and desperately wished to continue acclimating to my newly adopted home. It was completely intoxicating. I received dozens of courtesy honks and waves from my new neighbors as I tried to locate the interstate on-ramp. The sooner I gathered up my things, the sooner I could initiate my permanent departure from my old life and start my new one. I was certain the way out of town had to be nearby, but I couldn't manage to locate the exit. There were no signs. I must have driven in circles for hours. Finally, I threw up my hands in surrender and gave up. Leaving to tie my loose ends just didn't feel important anymore. I was hungry, and Dave's Drive-In had a special on a burger, fries, and chocolate malt shake for $1.35. A man's gotta eat, right? Luckily, the miracle of 5G internet even reaches the outskirts of Newton airwaves, so I'm sending out this final notification to my friends, family, and employers. I'm not coming back. I found a great job as a mechanic at Roston's Garage, a good apartment downtown, and tomorrow, I'm going to ask out Sarah the waitress from the soda fountain. Wish me luck. Being a nice guy got me a new job. So this started about a year ago. I've been working as a full-time chef for the past 12 or 13 years or so, and last January, I was thinking about getting an extra job on the side. I've been more or less single for the past 3 years, and I've shared custody of my 2 kids, so I have plenty of spare time to make some extra cash. I went to my local grocery shop and asked if they needed an extra hand. Now, I didn't have any experience of this kind of work, but I'm a service-minded, positive, and helpful guy, and the manager was eager to have a relatively young, 30 years old, man from the local area on the team, as the majority of the staff are middle-aged women. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but diversity is positive. He was also intrigued by having someone with a full-time job come to him and directly ask for work, as job applications usually are more formal and less personal. So I started almost immediately, and after a short time, I fell in love with the work, the team, and the fact that it's just a 5-minute drive from home. I eagerly expressed my interest in more hours and told the manager I would love a full-time job if the opportunity was there. I was so happy working there, I could easily take a morning shift at the store, followed by an afternoon shift at my full-time job without feeling exhausted in any way. Rather, the opposite. My overall happiness got a serious boost from being welcomed, working extra, and doing my part for helping others. I was told I was very welcome, as my chemistry with both my coworkers and customers, as well as my tempo and quick learning, was much appreciated. They also have a relatively large hardware and building materials section of the store, with a separate team that had an open position to start immediately. But the contract with my full-time job prevented this. As my notice period was 2 months, we were in such a busy time of year that I had already promised to stay there at least until the end of the year. Sadly, there were also no openings at the grocery store at that time. And fast forward about 6 months, I was so busy with my full-time job that I didn't have any more shifts for the latter half of 2019. Come January 2020, my full-time job got less busy as usual at this time of year, and I had some extra time and energy to work at the store again. I talked to the manager, and he was as excited as I was about continuing the work relationship. Not even before I could have my first shift this year, I got a call from the manager this Monday asking me to come and have a chat. Turns out one of the 2 employees at the hardware store had delivered his resignation the previous Friday, and they wanted me to fill that position. As last time, they needed someone to start as soon as possible, so I talked to my managers at the hotel I've been working at for most of my grown-up life and told them this was something I really wanted to pursue, and that if I was unable to start straight away, the opportunity would pass me by. Note, I've been completely open with them about my second job, how I really liked working there, and that this was something I wanted to pursue if I got the chance. I've also assured them that it's not about wanting to leave the hotel, but the time has come for me to try something else. Also, my full-time job is 35 minutes away from home, so I could save more than 1 hour a day and probably $2,000 every year in gas money by working at the store. I was met with understanding in every possible way, and they would ignore my notice period for helping me take this opportunity. They even said I'm more than welcome to come back if this somehow doesn't feel right. As of writing this, I got the phone call from the manager telling me I can start as soon as I want to. Now I just have to arrange things with my managers at the hotel, and then it's just a matter of days or weeks until my first day at the new job. I wanted to tell you this for several reasons. For one, there is the advice of trying something new and do it as best as you can. Being a nice guy paid off, both in getting the opportunity for a new job and the fact that my previous employer helped me land it. Here in Norway, there is some stigma around working in grocery shops. Some see it as something you do just because you need the money and not something you do because you want to. I'm hoping to show as many people as possible that this is a misconception and to show my kids that working in retail, grocery, or hardware is just as rewarding and somewhat important as my other job. I'm not going to go all inspirational on you, but I really wanted to share. This evening, I'm going on a weekend trip with my family, and I'm so excited to tell them the news. I know they'll be happy for me, and my kids will be over the moon to find out I'll be working closer to home. Too long, didn't read. Took an extra job beside my full-time job, and being nice, positive, and interested landed me a new full-time job closer to home with no other relevant education than a good upbringing. Thank you. My first toxic bee experience. As I was growing up through high school, I was your typical shy nerd, not many friends, niche interests. You know who I'm talking about. I thought I had a knack for being likable. In reality, I was probably just good at picking my audience. At the end of high school, I bounced off to college with a risky combination of social inexperience and unrefined interpersonal observation skills. Things went badly. I was lucky enough to have been paired with good roommates. They were better at making friends than I was, so I just naturally latched on to the friend group they were growing. Enter the star of the show, Amanda. Let me say this in the kindest possible way. Describing her as a toxic bee is an understatement. Let's make a list of her problems. 1. Practically every interaction I had with her involved some type of reference to her love life. Spoiler, she doesn't have a very good one. One of her first interactions with me was to comment on how similar I looked to her current boyfriend. On another occasion, I asked her if it would be accurate to say that she had an ex-boyfriend story for every situation. Without hesitation, yup. This obsession with her romantic life would be her defining characteristic for the time that I knew her. 2. She was, without question, one of the most shallow and negative people I have ever met. Every other word out of her mouth was in service of antagonizing, belittling, or insulting someone or something. I'm entirely convinced that the only reason she managed to worm her way into the social group was that she lived across the hall from us. 3. She had a complete lack of social grace and respect. She constantly attempted to derail or hijack the conversation she participated in. She needed attention and was not subtle in her efforts to acquire it. All of these things went straight over my head, and Amanda saw this. You see, while the above behaviors were things that everyone had to endure, I suffered each of them triple-fold, particularly point number 2. Amanda took every chance she could to villainize, ostracize, or belittle me. By the midterm, I noticed that I was drifting away from the social group, though I still didn't know why. It all clicked when I had to, quote, attend. In other words, take a selfie of myself at several campus events as part of a class assignment. I walked over to the ticket booth. They had just finished with someone. One, hey guys, and a selfie later, I had what I needed. Amanda storms over and, in front of another group member, accuses me of being insensitive towards the attendance. They only had 1 or 2 people in line, and the selfie took all of 5 seconds. As we walk, she escalates my transgression from being insensitive to me being a person that lacks empathy. I was stupid enough to take her comments to heart and ended up with a student counselor talking about how lonely I was and how I felt I wasn't good enough for my friends. And as I poured everything out, the pieces suddenly fit together. Amanda was a bully, and I was her victim. Moreover, I knew why. Amanda had been having troubles with her boyfriend, no surprises there. But the reason she was sticking with him, in spite of this, was due to the fact that she had me as her emotional release valve. All of the frustrations, insecurities, and unhealthy emotions from her relationship were being channeled directly at me. I stopped taking her crap. I talked back. Things got better. I never got the chance to tell her everything that I had learned. Amanda stole from the group and was basically excommunicated from the only social group she had. Last I heard, she got pregnant from her boyfriend and settled down with him. I hope the kid will be okay. But with a mom like that, I don't like their odds. I know I'm a better person because I knew you, Amanda. I know because I can say now what I couldn't then. Little ways that I remember my dad. When I was growing up, My dad got frequently sick because of his doctor. I remember one time when I was very little, he looked absolutely ghostly, laying in bed groaning and unable to breathe for hours at a time. I wanted so bad to help him that my kid logic told me if I act more like Dad and like the things that he likes, that'll make him happy and he'll get better. And I decided to do just that. So I went into his room and asked him what his favorite color was. He told me that he really liked blue, red, and green. In that order, too. After that, I made it my mission to make blue my favorite color, because that was the one he said first. It took a while, but he did get better. Of course, my method didn't work, but at the time, I believed it did. Once during the summer, I woke up early to see my dad making a cup of coffee. I can't remember the brand, but he made it black, took it to the kitchen table where I was sitting, added 2 tablespoons of sugar, and took a gulp. I think he noticed me staring at it and offered me a sip. I, of course, took one. I remember how strange the taste was at first, but once I tasted the sugar, I loved it. He went out for a smoke when it was halfway done, and I may or may not have drank the rest. I definitely inherited his sweet tooth, because when I tried my mom's coffee made with cream, I literally started gagging. It was the most disgusting thing I had ever tasted. After trying both their coffees, I would occasionally steal sips of my dad's coffee. I say the best memory that I have of my dad, though, was when he took me on a 2-day trip out of the province. At the time, he worked at a trucking company, and he drove a heavy-duty semi-truck with a driver's seat, passenger seat, and a bed in the back. He told me before we left that he just had to pick up something and that nobody was allowed to know I was there. Company policy, I think. I hid in the bed and put his heavy sweater over my head as I was sitting up. Completely unnecessary. He told me so himself, but I was paranoid. After we left, I would crawl from the bed to the passenger seat periodically and talk to him basically the whole trip. This may not seem that special, but for me, it was like a dream come true. My dad worked long hours, and all I ever wanted to do was spend more time with him. The whole drive, he listened to all of my stories, whether they were about a show I watched, school, or just about characters that I had made up. I talked so much that looking back on it now, I'm amazed he never told me to be quiet. We stopped at A&W along the way multiple times since we both liked their burgers and root beer. For context for this next part, I grew up in a hamlet with very little lights at night. I loved seeing cities after dark. Every sign, shop, restaurant, anywhere that had light was mesmerizing to me. When we made it to the city where he had to deliver his load to, it was around 10 p.m., and I was on the verge of passing out. My dad was so excited to show me the lights, though, he kept telling me to stay up just a little longer because he knew just how much I loved seeing the lights. He told me that the city we were going to was beautiful at night and that I would absolutely love it. He was right. It was breathtaking for me, to say the least. I still passed out before we were in the city, though. In the morning, he brought me a sprinkled donut and a chocolate glazed donut for himself from Tim Hortons as a breakfast and told me not to let my mom know. I'm sorry that this is so long to whoever is reading this, but I'm just about done. I found my dad dead when I was 9. He was always so sick, so the short time that I had with him was agony for him. And to know that hurts me, because after that road trip, I know without a doubt that he wanted more time with me too. My favorite color is still blue, and I always associate navy blue specifically with my dad since that always looked best on him. I drink my coffee black, never with cream, but always with plenty of sugar. Even though I now live among bright lights, they've never stopped being beautiful to me. A&W now gives me a warm, nostalgic feeling, especially when the sun comes in at just the right angle. And finally, Tim Hortons glazed chocolate and sprinkled donuts remind me of the best time that I ever had with my dad, and always manage to put a smile on my face to remember, don't tell Mom that we are having donuts for breakfast. She won't like that. All of these little things help me to remember all the moments we had. Even if our time together wasn't long, it still meant something to me. I carry those memories with me forever. I overdosed once. I grew up with a wonderful childhood. Any toy I wanted, great house with a pool, hot tub, playground, etc. Trips to Disney World every year, loving parents, etc. It came crashing down when I was 12. Dad cheated on my mom, which caused me to hate men. We moved to a new town, got bullied. Left halfway through the year of my 8th grade as a then 13-year-old and got homeschooled for the second half of that year. Started realizing I was gay at 13, which caused me self-hatred. Went back to school in a new town as a freshman, made some in-class friends, kept to myself. Didn't socialize whatsoever after school with my friends, no matter how many times they'd ask over the course of my freshman, sophomore, and junior years. Over the course of those 3 years, I lived in small spaces with 5 people: my mom, me, my sister, and my 2 younger brothers. I was a third parent and dealt with seeing my father and hating him every week. I was also dealing with and coming to terms with my sexuality. It was torture. I spent a lot of time watching and loving reality shows. Senior year, I realized I was going to be an adult very soon and that I needed to change things. Force myself to socialize more outside of school. Force myself out of the closet to my friends. Realized I was popular among people because I'm very nice and gay, attractive, tall, kind of a nerd. Started experiencing relationships and dating at almost 19 when I went to my community college. Started to date the leader of the school's GSA club. It made me feel elated and happy, like I could open up to people. It ended with him basically telling my newfound friends behind my back, I need to be mean to him so he learns about life. Because I was an innocent doe in the sense of social politics. I moved on from him. Moved to another guy a year later who was the epitome of bad communication. I misread so many things about him, and as time went on, I self-imploded. I did stupid things like inhale over 30 cans of Duster in a month, down entire boxes of medicine like Benadryl and Quercetin, and I crashed my car that I had just started to drive a month prior. He wasn't an angel, but I was the bad guy in the situation. He was 4 years older than me. I ended up overdosing on one of the boxes. I did an entire box of Quercetin, and I could feel that something was wrong in my body. So I fessed up to my mom, and she freaked out. Went to the hospital and was in the ICU for 2 days. After I got out of the hospital, they put me in a psych ward. Did a lot of self-reflecting. Got out, and 2 weeks later I had to go back in because I made a stupid mistake. Decided to do half a box of Benadryl. When I was in the second time, I realized I needed to make better decisions for myself if I wanted to make the most of my life. At this point, I was 20. I met a guy in there the second time who was really nice. He got out, and I got out later that day. He asked me to come over since he was relatively close to where I lived with my mom. I did end up getting a new car at this point in time. He wanted me to do meth with him and have sex. I can remember very clearly that I was at a serious fork in the road and that I needed to make a good decision for myself. So I left. Got a job at a place that was social and fun, local Dunkin' Donuts. Started thinking about who I am and what I want out of life. I was also still friends with the same guy who had bad communication. He was a nice person at the end of it all. A few months later, by this point it was June 2016, when I was 20 and a half, I had gone a little psycho out of the sadness feelings for second partner, and he blocked me. I was so upset that I ran into the woods and cut myself a lot, on my leg and arm. Instant regret. I pulled myself together and forced myself to move on. Less than a month later, I met someone new who was super sweet and fun. He ended up being a meth head who was HIV positive. I'm not infected, thank God. I know because it's been 3 years. He did horribly vindictive things like tell me, I can't talk to you right now, I'm at a gangbang. The weirdly specific thing is that he got addicted to the same guy who offered it to me. He and I were opposites in the decisions we made. I realized that life is about making good decisions. Spent another year and a half being toyed with by an a-hole alcoholic guy who manipulated my emotions. I was meanwhile living out of my car for over a year. Then, about 2 years ago, I got a job as a travel agent. Forced myself to get over an alcoholic guy. I started living on my own and making great money. I started traveling the world. I only got the job because of how well I sold myself, which I had no sales or travel experience other than Disney World. I've been able to formulate an idealistic life plan versus a realistic life plan. I'm shooting for the higher set of dreams, but I've got a great backup plan with my corporate travel agency in place. Currently set to become a manager of my own store. Respect. A tale between my ex and I. 4 months ago, I got into an argument with my then girlfriend, who I've dated for 2.5 years. The context was that she was at the local mall on Black Friday and wanted to stay there until closing time for the mall. I was confused on why she wanted to stay, so not wanting to get into details on why, I just told her that she should probably leave the mall because it's Black Friday, and I didn't want anything bad to happen to her. She texted me and said that she was all right and was with her friend, so I just simply replied with okay and left it there. The next day, I went onto Instagram to see what was going on with the world, and I noticed a picture of my ex in a skimpy outfit with her tongue out, sucking on a lollipop. So now my chest began to thump deeply. I asked her what was up with her, and she said not to bother. I was disappointed with the response and asked again, and this began an argument that lasted over 10 hours. Then she said probably the worst thing I could hear or read. "Why are you so overbearing?" Which to me says, stop caring. This ticked me off. I've done so many things for her to show her that I cared for her, and that's what she tells me? So much so that when she realized she couldn't win the argument, she dragged her mother into it to tell me to stop. Not wanting to be disrespectful, I complied. The next day, I just go onto my phone and text her, "If you want me to stop caring, I'll stop." She then texts, "I love you." I was confused. You can't go one day and say that I should stop caring, and then say, "I love you" the next. So I thought that if she wanted me not to care, that's what I was going to do. And that's what I did. It took her a week to realize something was up. It was also during this week I began to realize how she probably wasn't the right person for me. She called me and asked why I was so uncaring about her anymore. I told her to look at last week. I also told her that I'm upset with her because of many reasons. She told me to stop caring. She doesn't take my advice. She wore a skimpy outfit at the mall on Black Friday to probably get attention from other guys. I wasn't getting any appreciation for anything I did for her. And she was not there for me when I came to her and told her that my dad has cancer, while I was there for her 2 weeks straight when her cat passed away. The words I said sent her into tears, like she heard her cat died again. She told me she knows that she has a problem and was going to fix it. I said that was fine. She would proceed to not speak to me for the next few days. Then that took a whole week. Then 2 weeks. Then a whole month. She would also give me dirty looks and pretend not to notice me in the hallways. But just a bit after the new year, I had enough. A few days before the breakup, I started to take all the photos I had of the both of us on my Instagram. I could tell that she was stalking me because she would proceed to do the same. I also started to realize when she didn't speak to me, I became happier by the day. The day of the breakup, I wrote a closure text to tell her that I don't want to wait anymore because of the way she was doing things, and offered to just be friends. She finally answered me by saying that she, quote, hopes that I can find someone that can treat me better, and then proceeded to not speak to me. She would also begin to unfollow me on everything from Snapchat to Instagram. It wasn't until 2 weeks ago that I realized that she was still following me on my second Instagram account. So I just decided to write another closure to tell her how I really felt. I wrote that I didn't know if she still had feelings for me or just forgot. Her plan to block me out of life had failed. I also proceeded to say that I have been living my best life without her since then, and she should just give up the attitude she has towards me. And I also threw in that my dad was, okay, thank you for asking, and I didn't need anything. You've done enough. I felt great for the next 3 hours until my best friend, who was also her friend, out of the blue, decided to defend her, saying it wasn't right. I told him I did her a favor, and I was the better person through all this because she was acting like a child, and he should stop listening to the garbage she was feeding him like she was doing to me when we were dating. Me knowing that she asked him to defend her, like her mom had to be dragged into our argument 4 months ago. Am I an a-hole for doing that closure? I don't think so, but I wanted to hear what you think.